Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BiteSSSize Best Practice Webinars from Scottish Student Sport. My name is Neil Rankin, and this month's topic is volunteer recruitment and development. Volunteering, massively important to Scottish student sport and all the work that we do. So really excited by today's panel. Loads of experience both as volunteers, but also in the whole recruitment of them and developing the people as well. Quick bit of housekeeping from myself. If you do have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A function. We'll try and get through as many as we can. And if you just want to add some insight, add in some thoughts about your own experiences as a volunteer or recruiting volunteers, then use the chat function as well. But now to get started, so our host today is SSS's very own Jess Barrows. Jess is our competitions coordinator at SSS. She handles a huge amount of recruitment, mostly over the summer, of our new volunteers as sports chairs and now actually a lot of development groups that we have as well for all our sports. But Jess is also a long-term volunteer with UEFA Euro 2020, which is a theme through all our panelists today, which is fantastic. Could have been a very different vibe today if it wasn't for the result in Serbia a few weeks ago, but great to have everyone here. And Jess is also a director at Scottish Club Sport as well. So I'm sure we'll hear more about your background, Jess. But Jess, welcome to the webinar and thanks for hosting today.
Thank you very much, Neil. Yeah, it is a pleasure to be reunited with the two people we see on the screen, Jamie and Caitlin, because we have had some fun times getting ready for the UEFA Euros. Obviously looking a bit different this year than otherwise. But no, I joined that as a great volunteering opportunity. I thought it would be a great opportunity to be part of something bigger, as one of the main reasons I've done volunteering all throughout, and it's just a pleasure to kind of have that experience and to meet these people too. And like I say, I can absolutely vouch for their experience and their absolute amazement that they can bring to the panel today. So thank you very much. I believe we're going to head straight in to hear from Caitlin first, Caitlin Kelly, who is a former president at Glasgow University. So very much an alumni of the sector, which is brilliant. But her CV is just phenomenal. I mean, she's not only volunteered at one Commonwealth Games, the Glasgow 2014, which I know a few of us will have participated in, but also just another, you know, the Gold Coast as well in there. European Championships is on the list, you know, a bit of cricket, a bit of Special Olympics. I feel like if there's ever been a big event in the last few years, basically as long as Caitlin's been an adult, I feel like Caitlin's been there. So she has an awful lot to offer and I can't wait to hear about her presentation today. So without further ado, Caitlin, please do share your thoughts on volunteering.
Great, thank you very much, Jess. I will just share my screen with you all now. So I think, is that showing up? You just give me a thumbs up, Jess, if that's showing for you. Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks to Jess for that lovely introduction. I'm blushing. So yeah, I'll just jump straight in. Oh, it's not moving slide. Classic technical difficulties. Okay. So I thought I'd just start off with a brief introduction. So yeah, as Jess said, I am a former president of GUSA, so I thought I'd go with a 2020 social media theme there, how it started versus how it's going. So the photo on the left, obviously from my time with GUSA, and such great fond memories of that time. And I am now working on UEFA Euro 2020 as the volunteer coordinator for Glasgow. I kind of almost accidentally fell into the field of volunteer management. When I left GUSA, I had no real intention of pursuing, I guess, you know, a career within volunteer management and looking after volunteers, but it has so happened that way. And you know, the events that Jess mentioned that I've been able to be part of over the past few years, all of my experiences in those events have pretty much been in workforce management, as they call it in events, which is predominantly, most of it is looking after volunteer operations on site, and looking after volunteer well-being, not distributing, that's the wrong word, but assigning volunteers out to all of the relevant areas that make events happen, everything that goes on behind the scenes. Volunteers have an impact on that at major events, and my role when I'm on site is to make sure that all the areas have the right volunteers that they need, and a lot of that happens, as I've realised this year, working for UEFA. A big part of that is through the recruitment, which I'll go on to speak about in a bit, sort of best practice that I've learned through volunteer recruitment. I guess, I thought it was worth mentioning, and I added a couple of bits in here last minute. While I was at university, I was on my club committee, which was women's hockey. I was also an umpire. I drove buses. And similarly, I then got involved with GUSA and was on GUSA Council for 4 years prior to my role as president. And I think why I thought it was important to mention that was really because, when we talk about the value of volunteering, which is the next slide, which is still not coming up. Yeah, I think that's changed now. So yeah, when I'm talking about the value of volunteering, I think for me personally, it wasn't until I'd left that university bubble and left my role in GUSA and kind of had the experience working in events and with volunteers that kind of gave me the hindsight to look back at my own time at university. When I went out to the Gold Coast and at Cricket World Cup and things, I started to question if I was in fact a bit of a fraud, and started thinking, oh, I've actually never been a volunteer myself, and the cheek of me to come here and manage these volunteers and tell them what to do. That's so ironic because I've actually never been a volunteer, and really started getting a bit anxious about why I hadn't had any of these experiences. I'd started speaking to all these volunteers with incredible stories about volunteering that they'd done, and that kind of when I took time to think about it, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, I actually realized that those experiences as an umpire, as a bus driver, and things like that, and being on club committee, being on GUSA, actually is volunteering. And I think that is probably true for a lot of students and graduates, is that they don't actually consider what they do within student sport to be volunteering as such. And potentially, that when we talk about volunteering, especially to young students, it can kind of seem laboursome and a bit of a chore. And part of the development is making it seem that it's not a chore like that, and that what they can get out of it. And I think that the true value of volunteering at university doesn't really become apparent to many graduates until after they've left and can look back and realise, oh, what I did actually was volunteering, and these are the things that I got from it. Now, obviously, we all know much why we want students involved in sport, all over, as a player, participant, and the social factor and the skills that you learn through being part of something bigger at university. For me, I guess personal development and a bit of self-discovery was what I got through volunteering. As I say, that hindsight when I look back and realise what I actually did through the various roles that I took part in at university. I've included a photo of the Commonwealth Games there.
Caitlin, would it be possible, sorry to interrupt you, if you could just go back to that slide, just because it's coming up on my screen, just as it's still the home page. So we want to see this wonderful photo. We definitely don't want to miss out on that.
Yes. Is it just coming up the first slide, Jess?
It is, yeah, with your standard PowerPoint presentation slide with the home page and everything else down the left. Let's try this again. I didn't want to interrupt you mid-flow, Caitlin. This is the issue. I just wanted to see that photo. It's also important to feel like the essence of the games.
It wouldn't be a Zoom call without a wee technical glitch, so feeling good now.
That's it. Perfect.
Okay, we'll see if it goes to the next slide eventually, but Yeah, I felt it was ironic because I actually, when the Commonwealth Games obviously happened when I was a student, and everyone on GUSA was applying to be a volunteer because it was in Glasgow, and it was going to be such a big, amazing event. And I actually got rejected to be a volunteer at 2014, and that then prompted me to apply for a paid position, which was really my first experience of managing volunteers. So that photo there is members of the army holding me up, and all of my team of volunteers behind me. Jamie, I'm sure, had similar experience, like lots of super enthusiastic volunteers. And people who know me know that I can be a bit of a control freak. I always like to be the person who organises stuff. And that bottom bit, the bottom point there of volunteering at university, is true for what I've learned in my career as well, and why I love volunteer management is being involved in something that you love or you're passionate about or you think is really special, and helping to share that with others. And that was a big motivation for me throughout my time at university of why I wanted to volunteer in GUSA and my club committee and things like that. In terms of the value that it adds in longer term career, as I said, I don't think it's until maybe you leave university and can look back and see the value that volunteering really adds to your longer term career goals, particularly confidence and leadership skills. There's lots of things I've been asked to do since going into the world of work that I've not really thought twice about, and that's really because of I did a lot of those things or had similar experiences at university through sport, that was able to build my confidence and just naturally build leadership skills. The bottom point on there, I said work-life balance, not necessarily adding value to your career as such, but definitely to your personal well-being as you go through the world of work. Knowing where your boundaries are and knowing when you have to take a step back and do something else away from either studying or from work is definitely beneficial, because I think moving into work after you graduate can be so overwhelming, that being able to have that experience of previously balancing study and sport or study and a hobby, things like that, and volunteering definitely helps when you move into the big bad world. So the next few slides, still not changing. Classic technical difficulties continue. Oh, is it moved now, Jess? Yes, okay, excellent. So volunteer recruitment. I was just saying to Jamie that actually the Euro has been really my only real big experience of volunteer recruitment. As I say, most of the other roles that I've had since leaving university have been predominantly around volunteer operations, volunteer management on site, and I've not previously had the chance to be involved at the recruitment stage. But definitely since joining UEFA back in April in 2019, it has been non-stop recruitment. And that is what Jess and Jamie were part of the team that helped us with that. But I guess first of all, I had to recruit them as part of our wider team of long-term volunteers. And when I came into that role, the first step for me was getting the house in order, as I refer to it as. So I think, important things before you start any kind of volunteer recruitment, whether it's for one volunteer or for, like we were doing, 1,500 volunteers, you have to make sure that you have your house in order. And by that, I mean, knowing why you want volunteers, what are the aims of the project or the organisation, and how exactly you think the volunteers are going to add value and support you to achieve that. I think it's really important that you have a commitment to involving volunteers before you start, because examples, even now I laugh about it, UEFA will do it, and I think back to university when we'd be like, oh, we'll form a subcommittee for this. And you think, oh, we'll recruit more people to help us. And actually, if there's not a role for those volunteers, and there's not actually something that those volunteers can help achieve or add value to, then there's no real point in recruiting them, because first of all, they'll come in, they won't have the best experience, and then that then continues. They won't volunteer for anything else to do with the organisation, and it just leaves a bad taste in the mouth, so to speak. Being clear in your mind about the duties, the sort of tasks that you want volunteers to carry out, and also the sort of personal qualities and skills that you're looking for in a volunteer. And I think most importantly, thinking really about what you can offer the volunteers in return for them volunteering. I think a lot of volunteering adverts that we see that maybe aren't, fully thought through, people say, oh, come and join us and help us do this and help us do this. There's so much of that out there that volunteers want to know what you can offer them. Much like when people look at a job advert, you think, how am I aligned with this job? And what is this job going to offer me? How is it going to help me develop? And what am I going to get out of it? And then obviously you get down into the nitty gritty of like when and where and things like that. So the logistical elements of it, who's going to be the point of contact for the volunteers, timeline, policies, all the boring stuff, GDPR, all that kind of thing. And much of that and the questions above kind of form the basis of a volunteer policy. It doesn't have to be heavy, just having it all laid out exactly what the commitment is, to why the volunteers are involved, what they'll be doing, the point of contact, the logistical elements, things like that. And then, so creating a clear path to your door, which I guess follows on from what I've said above, putting together the procedure for the recruitment campaign. So that includes, how you want to recruit volunteers, the screening process, the support, training, having that assigned point of contact ready. So if you need a separate inbox or, a person that's designated to answer volunteer questions, and that all needs to be in place before you start any kind of recruitment, because as soon as an advert's out there, that's when questions can start coming in. And if there's a delay in getting back to a volunteer, then that is, a prime area where you can lose them, because if they're not getting a response from you quickly, that kind of sets the precedent going forward of, their expectation and what they can expect throughout, their time as a volunteer. Similarly, don't start recruiting until you're ready to move right to the next stage. So when I went through the process of getting Jess and Jamie and the rest of our long-term volunteer team on board, it was kind of one of the first tasks I had to do when I came into my role. But I was kind of all excited and ready to start meeting all these like keen people who were wanting to be volunteers, but I had to hold back until we were ready to move to the next stage and had more information about the next steps in terms of training, shifts and things like that, onboarding. And I guess, just going back, so the final point there is going back to what I said, communication is the absolute key. From the very moment that you put an advert out there to the point where the volunteer leaves the organisation, the whole way through, it has to be, communication as much as you can do, basically. So in the recruitment message, being clear about what the volunteer will be doing, where, when, how often, who else will be involved, thinking about all the questions that a volunteer could ask and addressing that in an advert or the sort of recruitment campaign. Produce, your publicity around your recruitment should also answer the volunteers' unspoken questions about, why they should volunteer. Like I said at the beginning, what you're going to offer them, addressing why they should, not why they should volunteer for you, but what they're going to get by volunteering for you, basically, and making communications concise, clear, to the point, and I guess consistent across the board. There's nothing worse than a really good initial message and then just something thrown together last minute. Making sure that the language, the style, the imagery and things is consistent throughout, so as messages aren't getting confused. I included this Harry Potter gif here, as I actually used that in my interview for UEFA, because it was a bit this is obviously the scene when Harry starts to get his letters for Hogwarts. And I had to do a presentation in my interview, and they asked, can you tell us, what you think, what are the key things, much like this, about volunteer recruitment? And I said, it would be great if everyone that wanted to be a volunteer out there just, magically got this letter in the mail, and it was able to be delivered to exactly the right people. But I think that is key, looking for, when you're doing your sort of communication and the advertising, looking at, what are you able to offer volunteers, and what are volunteers going to get out of the opportunity, and then targeting that recruitment campaign in specific areas. So trying to think of an example in sport, if we're looking for umpires and referees and things like that, looking at people who, are skilled in, they know the rules of the game, they play that game. Obviously, there's no point trying to recruit a rugby referee within hockey or something, like within a hockey club. I mean, there may be people in there, but having a more targeted recruitment often helps. I went straight to Jamie when I had to recruit volunteers for this project, because I knew he was, big football person, involved with volunteers anyway, from Glasgow, loves Glasgow. So all those kind of things, I was like, yes, he is one of the ones for me. And thankfully he said yes. And the other picture I've put there is obviously at the beloved U of G. And that was when we went during Freshers Week to do some volunteer recruitment. And that's just, again, about creating a clear path to the door. So making it as easy as possible for volunteers to sign up and apply to be a volunteer. So just an example of, part of the publicity we did, just a QR code which took volunteers directly through to the application, and they were able to just bang their details in and apply straight away through that way. There's nothing worse than a really complicated application form to put people off, especially for a volunteering position. Okay, and finally, so a few more photos there. One of me styling a great hat in the Gold Coast on the right. But some of those photos I put in about was about maintaining positivity throughout. Once you have volunteers on board, I'd say one of the most important things throughout training, while you're managing them, and through rewards and recognition programs, is for you to be positive and act as a role model and good leader for the program. Volunteers very much will follow the example that they're set. Long days on venues at various events, it's all too easy to get a bit grumpy and tired when you're running on next to nothing in terms of sleep, but volunteers will follow the example, and I've noticed that and learned from that, and just have to paint a smile on and crack on with it, and people will follow you. In terms of retention, we again, the communication is key through all of this again, but good, clear and concise training. So you don't want to overload volunteers with training. So when I said their quality, quantity and delivery, so thinking about how it can be delivered. Is it e-learning, sort of online training, in-person training, one-to-one? Does there need to be practical elements, things like that? And making sure that it's, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of training, but as long as the quality is there and it answers the questions and the needs of the volunteers for the organisation. And then support, so very much a two-way street. And again, I'm sure, I hope Jess and Jamie will agree with me, especially from the Euro programme, we kept the feedback between ourselves and our long-term volunteers very much a two-way street. There's a lot of skilled people that volunteer, and utilising the skills and knowledge within your volunteer pool is really key to making sure that people feel valued, I think. So when volunteers give feedback, taking that on board and trying to implement ideas and things that they have, which makes them feel part of the process and that they are actually, really, really contributing to what you're trying to deliver, is really important. So it doesn't always have to be formal. We often just had like quick chats, open forums where people could, jump in and say their bit. But also, having things like exit interviews, when volunteers leave the organisation, to see what their thoughts were on the programme, areas that they think that could have been improved on. And often those things, you know, people say, oh, well, why would you do that right at the end? Why not, you know, continuously gather that? Sometimes as a volunteer, because things are so busy or the things that you're doing on a project are so, you know, hectic, that you as a volunteer don't have the time to think about that. But again, hindsight, you know, when you're finishing up, you can collect your thoughts and feed that back, so there can be continuous improvement. And reward and recognition. So I'm sure Jamie will touch on that. When, you know, especially in student sport, it's important to recognise the contribution that volunteers are having, and that goes back to you know, students and graduates not realising that they actually are volunteers and what they are contributing. And it's more than just giving. So a lot of the events that I've worked on, they always talk about R&R, reward and recognition, big programme, and there's always someone who manages it. And the first few events I was on, I just always thought of it as gifts and stash and, you know, the certificate that volunteers get, the stuff, so to speak. But, you know, in more recent times, realised that it's a lot more than just giving out tangible rewards and things. Sometimes it's as simple as a thank you. It goes a long, long way. And I think those are the things that are sometimes, you know, the little things that are not rocket science can often be overlooked or seen as, you know, so menial that it's not worthy of time or it's not important. But one of the biggest bits of feedback we got from the long-term volunteer project for UEFA was that we were so good at saying thank you. It was just constantly, you know, ways to show our gratitude to the volunteers. Celebrating success with the volunteers. So, you know, small milestones, big milestones, whether that's individuals or team milestones that have been achieved, celebrating that success with the team and thanking them and sort of quantifying and showing the contribution that a volunteer has had to that is really important. Obviously, for volunteers, they want to, when they're moving into the world of work, they want to be able to show or sort of, as I say, quantify what they have done at university and you know, what contribution they had. And again, I'm sure Jamie will talk about that, but for them to have something, even if it's just a certificate to show that they have volunteered and the time that they've given up is worth a lot, as much as we might not think of it at the time. And then final point there, you know, essential, especially I'm sure within student sport, still, that your current volunteers are your best ambassadors and recruitment tool. If you have, you know, club committee members or, you know, members of sports unions and things that are, you know, unhappy or they don't have the best experience, then that passes on, because then they'll tell people word of mouth that, oh yeah, it was all right. Whereas if they have a really, really good experience, it encourages more people to come forward for those roles. And it's the best recruitment tool, I think, that, you know, we can have, whether it's in major events or, you know, right down to small grassroots level sport, such as student sport. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour. You know, I know Jess said about questions, so if there's any specific questions about anything I've done at the end, I will be more than happy to answer that.
Oh my gosh, Caitlin, my page is already full with all these notes from that presentation. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone will glean something. I mean, I know I certainly have. Just the way that you're able to phrase certain things that maybe people are already doing, but actually haven't necessarily put it to words. I think that's really clever. And the way that you're able to structure that journey, it's so vital that everyone does think about everything from start to finish. You know, it's not just when you've got them, what are they going to do? Actually, the preparation really does make the difference. Whether that be stash at the end, you know, something that I particularly love at SSS, or something different. Neil, I don't think I've spotted any questions that have come into the chat at the moment.
No, not yet, but there's plenty of time. So if anyone does have questions, then yeah, you can use the Q&A function or the chat function, and we'll get a few more in. So hopefully a few more come in, and we can answer them at the end.
Perfect. Well, in that case, we will obviously give everyone time to think about questions to ask Caitlin as Jamie is talking. So Jamie, would you mind sharing your screen? Obviously, first though, let's introduce you because you are a bit of a beanock around the student sector. You are a sports development officer at University of Glasgow, and obviously work with a million volunteers. Do not quote me on that number, but essentially look after all the sports clubs there. But looking at your CV, it's fantastic, everything that you've done kind of already in the past. So badminton being a strong one, working at Glasgow Life, and also with a bit of time at Badminton Scotland, but a bit of squash here and there, and obviously UEFA, we can't get away from that. That's the theme that ties the whole thing together. And I'm sure there are plenty more as well that you just haven't told us because you're so humble. So thank you very much for joining us, Jamie, and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Not a problem. Right, I'll hopefully get this straightforward. Let's see how we get on. Is that working for everyone? Smashing. Okay, hopefully. First of all, I'm now kind of pretty annoyed that I didn't get to go first because I'm now nowhere near as impressive as Caitlin was, and I've also not got any Harry Potter gifts in mind, so I've kind of at a disadvantage already, but I'll do my best. So as Jess says, my name's Jamie. I'm the sports development manager at University of Glasgow Sport. Whilst my remit is, whilst I work for the sports department as such, most of my remit is with working with the GUSA clubs, all 50 of them, which, as you can imagine, has its challenges, but is extremely rewarding. I'm actually coming up for my 5-year anniversary in the role, and I still really enjoy it. So says a lot about it. I'm also the former Triple S West Region Chair, so I've quite somebody sit on the kind of Triple S Development Committee. So I'm acutely aware of the importance of volunteering, and so hopefully what I'm going to talk about is a bit is useful in some way. As you'll have seen, Caitlin and Jess probably know a lot more than me about recruitment, etc. So kind of what I'm going to focus a bit about on is kind of where volunteering got me, how GUSA rely on them, how we try to develop them, what we try to do to get the right person. Again, Caitlin touched on it in terms of reward and recognition, and also just a kind of final bit about how to get involved in opportunities, etc. So we'll make a start now. So when I was putting together these slides, I was quite conscious that I didn't want to be a case of here's me, here's what I've done, because then people might go, well, that doesn't really relate to me. But I also wanted to show that evidence of where volunteering can get you isn't just anecdotal, because we always hear about, oh, well, if you volunteer, it's great for the CV and all stuff as well, which it 100% is. But I wanted to show that, I suppose, without exaggerating, volunteering did kind of pretty much change my whole career path as well. So I just wanted to show you that as well. So a bit of my background, always kind of wanted to do a career in sport, but when you're a wee 5th and 6th year pupil, all you really know about is, I suppose, PE teaching and sports science. So I thought, well, I'll give PE teaching a bash. And then I realised I didn't particularly like kids, which wasn't a great start to being a teacher. So decided to go to Strathclyde and do sport and physical activity. And it was in there, one of my university modules was essentially a work experience programme where you'd go out, make contacts, do your hours, and then kind of write an essay at the end of it. And a lot of my course mates just thought, easy pass, I'll just make up some stuff, I'll get my pal to sign some things off, and then I'll write an essay at the end of it. I don't back my ability to write essays based on no experience at all as much as they did. So I thought, opportunity to go and actually get some experience. So as Jess said, I do have a bit of background in badminton, and I'd done my kind of badminton coaching qualifications and had kept in touch with the sports development officer at Glasgow Life, Jill O'Neill. So I kind of contacted her and explained what I had to do, and thankfully she was no problem at all. Just come on board and kind of complete your work experience with us. And it was here that I think my whole understanding and awareness of sports development really opened up. I kind of just wasn't aware of it at all, and I absolutely loved it. The role itself included everything from your kind of mundane tasks of filing and sorting forms, delivering sessions, of course, as well. But there's also even things that when there was major events on at I suppose it was in a time when social media wasn't as prevalent, so I'll let you guess what my age is, but it was like scanning newspapers just to see if there was any kind of information about the events in it as well, just for that sort of thing. And yeah, so did that, kind of kept in contact. And then when it came to when I graduated in 2013, again, everyone else looking for a job, and I got a phone call from Badminton Scotland to say, we've kind of created this, it was a temporary part-time job as a coaching development officer with them, and they said, we'd quite like you to have it as such, which was absolutely great. I mean, it's not often you get offered a job, well, approached for a job straight at university, which was absolutely brilliant. So started that. My remit was kind of the schools part of badminton in Scotland. We the top photo there, we deliver kind of badminton festivals, or carnivals as we called them, to school kids during the Scottish Open Grand Prix. Again, during that, we relied on volunteers to deliver the sessions, which was absolutely amazing. From then, I then moved to work for Glasgow 2014 as the squash competition coordinator. I noticed Caitlin mentioned during hers that she felt like a bit of an imposter sometimes. I definitely felt that, because I'd never even stepped foot on a squash court in my life, and then I was now squash coordinator there. So it was part of my remit was kind of, well, I was the main point of contact for volunteers. It was working out shifts and whatnot for them as well. So again, it just kind of shows that I think I am acutely aware of how important volunteering is, because otherwise I wouldn't be where I am today, really. I think the kind of benefits it gave me was it kind of enhanced my CV in places that I couldn't do it. When you come out of university, you've had a part-time job. I was a part-time lifeguard during it. So going into jobs, it's not a great amount of experience, but it definitely enhances the content. It definitely gives you experience of what it's like to have, I suppose, a grown-up job, shall we say. Here we go with that one as well. But a lot of what it comes down to, a lot of the kind of, it's the chicken and the egg, I think, is you go for a job and you can't get a job because you've not got an experience, but you can't get any experience because you've not got a job. So I think that's a fantastic way of gaining that experience as well. And I think there's not many things that come close to volunteering that kind of show a level of, I suppose, commitment. Well, that's what I've said there, commitment, passion and drive to go and do things. It shows that you are extremely motivated to go out and kind of better yourself, but also help others, impart knowledge on others as well. It's easy to turn up to a job and collect a wage, that's fine, but I think volunteering shows just completely different elements to that as well. So I think kind of that's how it helped me kind of get to where I am today. So yeah, so now I'm going to kind of speak about GUSA and the kind of volunteers that we have there. Now, I know that it kind of sounds cliched, but without the volunteers, GUSA, and I'm guessing, well, in general, student sport and sports just wouldn't happen with the volunteers. When I was putting these slides together, I was trying to work out how many volunteers we have, and it's probably close to kind of 550, 600 when you take into account all the club committees, club coaches, umpires, GUSA council members, kind of GUSA active buddies that we have, sponsorship secretaries, kit secretaries, etc. So although there's ones that you're probably more aware of because you've got your kind of day-to-day contact with them, but there is so many, and it's them that are a kind of vital cog to making student sport and student sport at Glasgow work. So in terms of training development, juggling uni and jobs and volunteering is obviously difficult. So what we try to do is try to make it as useful as possible. And again, I'm quite glad, and it wasn't planned at all, that Caitlin kind of spoke at the end about volunteers are your ambassadors, because if we are not providing a good experience for volunteers, or they're just doing anything else, it's a bit of a drag actually. in a couple of years' time, that message is going to pass its way right through a sports club, and you're not going to have people who want to get involved, and eventually it will just kind of dry up. So we really do try to make it as kind of beneficial for all the volunteers as possible. I've just put a list there about kind of how we offer that. We have club committee seminars, which in the past, probably in Caitlin's time, was a case of me just standing up and barking rules and deadlines at students and then saying, right, that's fine, you're free to go. And we now think, who's going to benefit from that? That can be in an email. So we're now moving towards having people come in to kind of deliver training sessions and CPD sessions and whatnot too. Last year, we really tried to up our CPD program, and we had bodies come in such as kind of Stonewall to work on inclusion, mental health, concussion training, nutrition, all these sort of things. We had people from Sports Scotland come in to talk about potential funding avenues and whatnot, so that even if these people don't perhaps use it in their year, there is a knowledge there that can be passed on down through the club. Or even if they go into something else, they then go, well, it's actually when I was in my role as hockey captain, for example, we got all this training, so I've gone through this professional development as such as well. So I think it's really important that they can then add that to their CV. We were really pleased with how that kind of CPD program was going, and then obviously COVID happened, so that's kind of hit the skids for a bit this year. But these are things that we are looking to try and get back and try and make these sessions less of a drag, because they are compulsory for committees to attend. And I think sometimes when you put that compulsory on things, they go, oh, I'm just going to go, and especially when it's on Zoom now, they can just go on and mute themselves, turn their camera off and go and do their own thing. So we are really trying to engage them, and the feedback we got from them was like really good. So it's something we're going to look to get back on board once we can, of course. Another thing we do is, it kind of leads into the reward part of it as well. We work really closely with governing bodies to try and organise coaching courses, and we've kind of got an agreement that if we give them facility access for free, they can give us 3 or 4 places on the course for free, and then we tend to ask the club to then administer those places to their volunteers. So for example, if they've got coaches who have just stepped in so that sessions can go ahead, perhaps don't have the official qualifications, they can then get put through the qualifications, or if somebody has got their level 1 as a thank you for all the hours of work they've done, they'll get level 2, etc, etc. So it's almost a gift in kind as such as well. And last year we also introduced a mentoring program. I suppose it's essentially kind of similar to the one that Triple S run, in terms of pairing people up based on interest and background and whatnot, and it's the staff members in the department and it's a council members. So for example, I'd be paired up with the club sport convener or the events convener, travel with travel, finance with finance, health and fitness with active lifestyles. And again, it's not with the plan of you're going to impart all your wisdom and you're going to do things how I do things. It's a chance for them to ask questions. It's a chance to give them almost like a task to lead on. So they've then got that experience to then call upon, and then they can come back to you for advice and guidance and whatnot as well for it. So yeah, succession planning, kind of probably slightly similar, well, different, but also similar to what Caitlin said about succession planning and whatnot as well. I think sometimes because there's a lot of committees have that 1 year in post and it's quite a cyclical nature of it, it sometimes can be easy to lose sight of, right, well, if it doesn't matter, they're out next year, or we don't have to worry about them because they're not going to be around, or it'll be a different person. But it really is in our interest, and when I say our, I mean those people that work with the clubs, that the people that come into your committee positions are the best quality as possible. As I say, it makes our life easier, it makes the club's life easier, they don't kind of stagnate for a year. what I would recommend to clubs, and if there's any people that are on club committees in the call, what we'd recommend doing is kind of starting that process early in terms of potentially not recruiting, but having a think about people that you think might be good next year. And it's not a case of pinning up against a wall and saying next year you're going to be captain, but it's a case of almost saying to them, have you thought about it? Here's what's involved. Here's why I think you might be good. And the last thing you want to happen is you're getting to an AGM and then you're scrambling about for people to take position, and then they perhaps take it not knowing what's involved or take it for the wrong reasons. So yeah, as much planning as possible. We also, around about the I suppose Caitlin will remember, it all gets very political around about February, March times when elections are coming up. So around about that time, we tend to host, well, we offer meetings with clubs, kind of with either outgoing and incoming committees to then say, like, do you know what you're doing year ahead? Or if somebody wants to approach us and say, we're thinking about going for a certain position next year, to kind of talk to us, we're more than happy to speak to them, because I think we can almost give that neutral part of it to then say this is what's involved in it. The previous captain might have had a different way of working things, and again, it can change from year to year, as I say, from the kind of cyclical nature. Reward and recognition. So you'll notice at the bottom there is a mention of stash, so I'll come on to that later on. But yeah, so at the universities, I'm guessing some of you will have either the same system or similar systems in terms of HERE records. So that's higher education attainment records, and it's just when you graduate, it's got on your file that you were the men's basketball captain for this year, exactly. And right now, we can't recognise all volunteers on committees, and it's a number of reasons, because the current process isn't great, because you have to input individual codes and whatnot, and when you've got 500 volunteers, it's not great, but we are working towards that. Last year, for example, we only recognised first team coaches, first team captains. We now recognised all teams captains, so we're definitely moving in the right directions. I would say it's important to get the balance between everyone being acknowledged and also keeping a certain status involved with it as well. And that can happen when it's kind of down to discrepancies in roles. A club captain between two clubs has relatively similar roles, whereas a kit convener or a tour secretary or a social secretary might have very different remits. So we're trying to create that balance of recognising as many people as possible, but also still keeping that element of status in it as well, I suppose. Yep, so next is obviously Goosa balls, so your equivalent of sports balls. We have blues and colours receptions now, and then where people that kind of go above and beyond are rewarded. We're actually moving to make that its own separate event now. So in the past, we have a kind of reception before Goosa ball, but it's now going to be its own event, just so it kind of gives it the status, I suppose, that it deserves. And then we also have an award that's kind of general outstanding contribution to sport, which is you take your best of your best colours awards, and then just kind of showcase what they have as well. We've also got internal club recognition, and then this isn't something that we dictate. This is obviously stuff the clubs to decide. Again, Caitlin mentioned she was a driver for a club. Some clubs offer like driver discounts as a way of saying thank you. Some clubs offer, if they're in a position to do it, free membership for the year to committee members and whatnot as well. Awards and club dinners, exactly. So again, there is lots of different ways of rewarding and recognising your volunteers. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the top down. It can come in different forms, different capacities as well, and it can be physical awards or gifts in kinds, for example, as well. The last two, this is something that I've noticed an increase in over the last couple of years, and it's our club committees coming to us and asking for us to provide references for them. I suppose if you've gone through uni and you've either not had a part-time job, or you've had a part-time job and that's your only job, and wherever you're applying to is asking for two, it sometimes can be difficult to come by a second reference. So we are more than happy to provide references for people. Again, as I said, access to coaching courses. And the last one, and I know it's basic, but students love stash. Students love stash all the time. I think most of my gym clothes are made up of t-shirts and shorts and various events, but things like that really do go a long way. But as Caitlin says, the most important thing is just a thank you. We have different ways of thanking them, and I really do think, to go back again to what Caitlin says, it's worked out very well that their experience is your best marketing tool that you can have in terms of future positions, because if they're passing on how good their experience was, or conversely how bad their experience was, it's going to hopefully benefit you, but it can cause issues coming back, because nobody wants to take on that committee position because it's too difficult or their experience of it is bad or whatever. So I really do agree with what Caitlin said there. The last one was, I was trying to think of some kind of big statement to kind of end on, and this is the best I can do, and it's not even that good, but there is obviously loads of opportunities out there, because I think since 2014, not only the amount of events that are coming to Glasgow is increased, there's also, I think, a kind of shift around volunteering, I think, has totally changed. Like, people who perhaps they first wanted to get involved in 2014 have now realised how good it is, and then will go from event to event to event to event. Caitlin will definitely know that. She'll have people that she'll have followed from Glasgow to the European Games, to moved out to Cricket World Cup, etc. And there's they've got their own groups and whatnot they know each other from. So I definitely think the mentality around volunteering has changed. So the opportunity to do it is definitely increased. And that's not just for events, but just in general. If it means contacting your local sports club, if it means coming to even within your own sports club to say, I'd like to offer my services to do something, then that's not a problem. If it's going to local authorities, basically what I'm trying to say is there doesn't have to be an advert, I suppose, for that volunteering opportunity. It's what I did. I contacted them and said, I'd like to volunteer, can I? And it worked out well for me. So that's what I've kind of gone for, the be the volunteer an organisation didn't know they needed, because sometimes they might think, do you know what, this guy's contacted us and it's going to be worthwhile, so let's go with it. So yeah, again, happy to answer any questions. My email's there, so even if you've not thought of any questions just now, I'm happy to contact me afterwards just to ask anything as well, or if you want me to share anything, then I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That was excellent. And I just can't believe you say that quote wasn't good enough. I loved it. I was fully empowered after reading that. Be the volunteer an organisation didn't realise they needed, or words to that effect, paraphrase. I honestly think that's the best, when I get to work with a volunteer that I just enjoy working with so much. And I think that's a great idea. Oh gosh, yeah, that's wonderful. It's that energy and it's that enthusiasm, that quality that they can bring. Yeah, then I think that that really summed it up. So thank you very much, Jamie. That was excellent, and really gave a great insight into what a university sports union are trying to do in order to make it the best experience possible. And it sounds like you guys are only going on up, which is fantastic. We have had 2 questions in, and one I think probably would be best directed to yourself, Jamie. Just asking, if you are approached about a student saying that they want to set up a club, and they're really trying to gain momentum and they want to get the numbers that are required to get started, what are your tips to start training as a volunteer and also to be in that capacity to help start a club?
Yeah, so I obviously know what it takes to start a club differs from university to university, so I'll try and be kind of generic as possible. But I think the big thing is just showing evidence that there's interest there. It might be that all it takes is getting in contact with your sports union to say, oh, we're looking to start I'm going to go down the Harry Potter route, because Caitlin mentioned we're looking to start a Quidditch club. Let's go with that. There's interest for it. There could be loads of people that are interested in it as well. So it's just really trying to get the marketing out there. There's a lot of work involved in starting a club, but if you've got the right person behind it, it can be the best thing. We are currently dealing with a couple of clubs who are looking to join next year. They would have joined this year had it not been for COVID, but the work, the people that have been involved in doing is massive, and it's just don't let kind of any barriers or any no's stop you. And also when you're going to have if you're having meetings with sports unions, for example, or meeting with people like myself, say for example, almost trying to preempt alternatives to any questions. If they then say, right, what about facility space? Then say, well, we're happy to do this, or what about cost for thing? And then if you can just make things, try to sidestep as many hurdles as you can, or offer alternatives for them. That'll probably be my best bit of advice, without trying to go too, I suppose, specific to Glasgow.
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. It's really preparation, isn't it? You know, the best volunteer in that instance is the most organised, the most prepared, the one who's done the research and has the passion. So yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And, you know, obviously this year has been, you know, getting in the way of many things. COVID's not been anyone's best pal. But obviously a lot of clubs this year, especially, you know, indoor sports that might have a few facility access issues, haven't necessarily been able to restart as normal. And, you know, maybe motivation's been a bit low in terms of the volunteers. You know, how have you been able to one, keep the motivation high, but also make sure that you've still got a functioning committee next year? Because, you know, as you've both pointed out, Caitlin saying about being an ambassador, if someone's kind of proven themselves to be a great role model and look what you can do in this role, if they haven't maybe been able to do as much this year, does that mean that the legacy isn't continued next year? You know, how are you counteracting that?
So our clubs have been actually, I'm pleasantly surprised this year in terms of providing like alternative offerings, I suppose, as such. Like we've got clubs that are just, they're doing Zoom sessions, for example, they're doing their online Zoom sessions, be it fitness sessions or kind of weekly check-ins to see how everyone's going. Because I think what is quite good that we're noticing as well, like the student clubs aren't, you don't go to a student club just for the physical activity element of it as well. You do go for that social interaction part of it as well. So they're organising kind of perhaps weekly Zoom sessions or fitness sessions. They are trying out different sports, well, sports that were allowed. For example, we have clubs that are in the past would never have even thought about going out for a run, for example, but they're now doing club runs. A lot of them, something that I was really impressed with was a kind of couple of clubs joined up to do come and try sessions. So for example, our sport is able to go ahead, why don't you come along and try your session, and if your sport can go ahead, or we'll come back and help you as well. I mean, because in general, numbers are obviously down in clubs across the board, well, at Glasgow, and I'm guessing across the board this year. So any sort of kind of partnership work, we definitely try to involve, and it's just trying to foster that engagement. Again, to go back to Caitlin touched on it, the kind of communication part. What you don't want to happen is they've come along to Freshers Fair, be it an in-person one or a virtual one. You've spoken to them then, and you've not heard from them since. It's a case of just remember, we're still here. You might be our first year, but this isn't going to last forever. Even if this year is the same, what's going to happen next year? So it's just kind of keeping the club in their mind, I suppose, that things will get better and there are alternatives too. Like I say, we've been really impressed by what a lot of clubs have already been doing, and the kind of, if it means they're going to go and play in like an outdoor mugger, as we call them, like the kind of multi-usage games areas, like they'll go and use them, for example. We've had clubs safely, I might say, like training in cordoned off parts of car parks, for example. So it's just trying to think outside the box for it as well.
I just to add what Jamie was saying there as well, as you know, I keep in contact with you know, my old club as much as possible, and we on alumni events or projects and things for this year, but obviously again that's all been postponed, and we kind of decided to put that on the back burner because that's obviously not a priority at the moment, because, you know, as Jamie's saying, numbers across the board may not be as high as they usually would be. And I think there was a bit of nervousness from some of the committee members of the club to showcase photos, or by saying, oh, this is what we'd usually be doing, this is photos from this past social, and here's a little testimonial of this person's experience from this time last year, and here's a testimonial from this person's Bucks Wednesday. And I think there was a bit of nervousness at first to share things like that, because it was almost like rubbing it in people's faces of, oh, well, tough luck, like this isn't happening right now, but this is how great it could be. But then I think the realization with everything, in 2020 has been, you've got to celebrate the good moments and remember those good moments, because they are going to come back. And I think for current club committee members, it is trying to showcase all of the good stuff that your club does, and showcasing, why it's so, again, go back to what are they going to get from being part of the club? They're not a volunteer, but to be a club member in itself, what are you going to get from that? And it's not just about playing the sport and the social element, it's all of those different things about almost creating a sense of family and things, and a support network at university. And as I say, just showcasing that and celebrating those good moments and looking forward to them coming back should help with retaining people and bringing people back into the club.
Absolutely. And it is that positivity, that optimism, things will get better, the light at the end of the tunnel, that actually might be the motivation, in my opinion, to take that on. If I was to be told, yeah, you could potentially be a good captain, and wouldn't it be great to be able to kind of pull us out of this rut and create whatever, the 21-22 academic year, obviously that will just feel fantastic if you're that person championing that situation. So it's almost flipping it and saying, this is an awesome opportunity. Sure, this year hasn't been the best and we haven't been able to do it all, but look at what you could do. There are still opportunities. Yeah, I like that. Just remaining optimistic and celebrating what we can. I believe Neil has a question, so I'll pass over to yourself, Neil.
Yeah, if that's okay. I am conscious of the time, but let's push it a wee bit because this is all good. Really interesting to hear both of you kind of allude to this kind of imposter syndrome, and at some point not feeling like you are sort of meant to be in that role. And I guess, like, I'm wondering, when you are recruiting, particularly for something like Euro 2020 or Commonwealth Games, like these huge events with thousands of volunteers, where's the kind of balance between recruiting someone that has some experience and they'll be able to really just hit the ground running, but also giving someone that kind of first opportunity, someone that might not have done some volunteering before, and maybe are feeling a bit daunted by doing something like that. Just wondering where that kind of balance is, and do these big events have some kind of direction for you to say that we want a certain number of people to give them that kind of first opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess particularly Euro 2020, this over the past however long it's been, 80, it feels like a lifetime, but we were really conscious that we wanted to engage people, because Jamie touched on it, Glasgow has since 2014 developed this really strong volunteering community, and I'd almost call it a clique. There's a definite volunteer clique in Glasgow and Scotland of people who put themselves forward for every single event. And there was a lot within our long-term volunteer team alongside Jess and Jamie, who they'd been volunteer recruiters for London 2012 and for Glasgow 2014, and then for European Championships. And it is great to have their experience on board and for them to be able to share their knowledge and their previous experience. But for us, it was super important to bring on people who had not had that experience before, and to sort of broaden that network and widen it out. So when we went through the recruitment process, again, looking at that targeted sort of recruitment, we were particularly interested in encouraging people from the football community. So again, go back to that, there's so many volunteers out there who don't consider themselves as volunteers. So we were reaching out to grassroots football clubs and saying, there's this volunteering opportunity, but framing it in a way that was, use your club experience and your club knowledge to come on board and work with us. So people who are maybe coaches or who, run the subs at junior football on a Saturday, whatever it may be, trying to open their eyes to there's more opportunities that they could use their skills and have a bigger experience in, you know, something, a really, really big event in Glasgow and in an area that they're passionate in. We did have, you know, we tried to encourage young people, and I think I was doing a little bit of work on stats just the other day, and compared to the last few big events in Glasgow, we had a considerably higher young population of volunteers. So that sort of 18 to 30 age group isn't as common as you've seen, you know, at 2014 European Championships. It's always leaning on the other end of the spectrum, sort of older volunteers. So that's really positive. And I think, you know, despite the sort of onus of this clique, their, again, word of mouth and reputation of the experience that volunteering can give is obviously, you know, slowly trickling down, and that is encouraging more young people to volunteer at big events, to realise that the experience that they can have through that.
And just to chip in there, I loved meeting that Glasgow clique. Obviously, as someone who's based in Edinburgh, at one point I thought, oh gosh, I am a bit of an imposter. Everyone here is from Glasgow. But, you know, quickly it became apparent that they just had all this experience that I could learn from. They were great chat and great support as well all the way through. Sometimes it was quite late evenings, but they would be there to kind of keep you chipper and moving forward. So, you know, there is that balance. I think if you are able to get that experienced volunteer to support that new volunteer will hopefully lose that imposter syndrome feeling at least a little, enough to feel confidence all the way moving forward. I know I certainly did. So yeah, you know, well done to them.
I think part of it as well is, again, like when you talk about, again, I was talking about recruitment, is using, not like trying to drop all the kind of jargon that is used. I think often people who don't have a lot of experience, you know, as Jamie said, you might have only had a part-time job, that you know, you haven't broadened your whole skill repertoire, that you can see a volunteer advert and it says, oh, you must have this and this and these are desirables, and people think, oh well, I don't have any of that. So we really tried to keep it simple. You know, are you passionate about football? Like, are you passionate about Glasgow? Are you passionate about volunteering? Do you want to give something back? Just keeping it really simple, sort of bite-sized, you know, chunk, like not making a big wordy chunky advert, because you just lose people straight away by doing that, and making it appealing in that someone sees it and they think, oh, I could really do that and I could really contribute to that, is important, rather than just overwhelming them from the off, because they won't apply otherwise.
Absolutely. And I think that does nicely bring almost the full answer to another question that we've had in, which is really about how to really market and communicate new opportunities for students, especially if it is a big program. You know, and I think you've answered that quite succinctly with, you know, keep it bite-sized, you know, keep it simple, make it sound appealing, and, you know, really just do your best to keep the target audience in place. I guess, Jamie, if you have anything else to chip in on the back of that, I know the Active Buddies campaign has been relatively fresh on the GUSA side of things. So, you know, when that first started, there must have been a little bit of, you know, how do we market this? How do we get people signed up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, as Caitlin said, there's keeping it as basic as possible is the way. You don't want to, if you pigeonhole a certain attribute, you're only going to get that type, and it's going to go down that route the whole time. That's all you're ever going to get. So keeping it as wide as possible, and also see in terms of the kind of marketing point of it. It's, I mean, I've sent out myself wordy emails. I just know no one's listening to as well. So again, keeping that bite size, keeping it social media channels the way to go. I now know for a fact that students check their Facebook 10 times more than they check their club email page, which has now led to me becoming a member of the 2020-2021 like committee's Facebook page, just so I can post things there as well. So I think just trying to get the message out there, but in as bite-sized as possible, and let the people come to you, because I've been guilty of my time on paper. I don't think sometimes people just don't do themselves justice on paper. So if they then go, right, well, actually, I don't think I can do that, and I don't know what that means, or I've only got experience of doing that, they might not be able to eke out their experience from that, if that makes sense. Whereas I suppose if people that perhaps do have experience of dealing with coordinators or whatnot as well, you go, well, you might think that you're only a glass collector at the union, for example, during your time, but for us that means there's something else there, there's whatever, and then you kind of eke that out as well. So I think just trying to open the gate as widely as possible and then take it from there, I would say.
I really like that. And your first point as well about variety, you know, variety is the spice of life. And one of the things I enjoy about volunteering is you do meet people from all walks of life. And the one thing you share is that passion for that sport or that one project. And, you know, as Caitlin was saying, one of the best things is sharing something that you love with other people. And so if you do have that variety, not only are you doing something you enjoy, you meet these people, and you as an organization actually benefit from this variety of experiences and skills that come in through that. So like you say, reaching out the best way possible to attract those people, be it social media, be it, you know, word of mouth as well, you know, as it was Jamie yourself saying, to open them up against the wall, but at least, you know, plant a few seeds and get that going. Surely that will definitely be of benefit. So really as we've mentioned before, just the preparation and planning and the foresight to think what is the best way to attract these people and make it sound as good as possible, especially for students who do have a lot on their plate, especially in this year of craziness. So definitely one to consider. Well, that's brilliant. I think we'll draw it to a close there, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Obviously, we have slightly run over the hour mark, but I think that was entirely valuable for everyone who was paying attention and for the viewers who will watch this recording later as well. It's just so interesting to hear about what a CV can look like with just a bit of volunteering on, what people look for, and how we can all work together to make sure that more people get that experience and feel rewarded and appreciated all the way through. I know I love it. Volunteering is something I could talk about for hours, so I will need to draw it to an end just now. But yeah, it's definitely something we can all do better and hopefully make the world a better place through sport. So thank you very much. And Neil, I'll hand over to you to just finish up, I guess, and send everyone into the rest of their evening.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, thanks, Jess, for hosting, and Jamie and Caitlin, thank you so much for your time. That's been really valuable, and yeah, just the amount of experience you guys have is just priceless, and it's definitely added a lot of value for everyone that was watching today and for everyone that will be able to watch. Great ambassadors for volunteering, but also great ambassadors for Glasgow Uni Sport. So I'm sure the folks over there in the West will be very proud. I've seen you guys today and hear you speak. So thank you. Keep up the good work, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you, guys.